So, the idea is that if things just went back to how they were in the first month, everything would be perfect. Look, let's slow this down for a moment. It's a heavy realization, but the reality is that there is no going back to a person who didn't actually exist. You aren't grieving a partner, you're grieving a performance. In the beginning, they handed over a script of exactly who was needed, and well, every single line was memorized, wasn't it? They showed up with that perfect intensity and all those promises. It felt like a mirror to the soul. But let's be real, that version was a mirage. It was just the bait used to get into the room, and now that the door is locked, the costume has finally come off. Alright, so the plan is to stay because of a conviction that if enough love is poured in, that original person will return. But they won't. It's a hard truth, but that person was just a marketing campaign. You're still trying to buy a product that was never actually in stock. You're addicted to a ghost, aren't you? So you're saying that those first few weeks were the real to them, and everything since then has just been a rough patch? Let's look at that for a second. You're holding on to those memories like they're a lifeline, aren't you? You remember the way they looked at you, the way they seemed to anticipate your every need, and the way they promised a future that felt almost too good to be true. Well, that's because it was. Alright, let's be honest here. That golden era wasn't a foundation, it was a hook. It was a carefully constructed version of a human being designed to win your trust as quickly as possible. You weren't falling for a person, you were falling for a reflection of your own deepest desires. They saw what you were looking for, and they mirrored it back to you with professional precision. It felt like a soulmate connection, didn't it? But a soulmate doesn't vanish the moment things get real. A soulmate doesn't turn into a stranger the second they feel they've won you. So, you're telling yourself that if you just behave perfectly, or if you just stop bringing up your needs, that person will come back out of hiding. But look. That person isn't in hiding. That person doesn't exist. You're addicted to a character that has been retired. The person who is dismissive now, the person who ignores your texts or makes you feel like a burden, that is the actual individual. The golden era was just the free trial, and now that you're signed up, the features have been stripped away. It's exhausting, isn't it? Trying to reconcile the person who brought you flowers with the person who now brings you tears. You keep looking for glimpses of that old version, catching a stray smile or a kind word and thinking, there they are. I knew they were still in there. But that's the trap. Those tiny crumbs are just enough to keep you starving for a meal that isn't being served. You're waiting for a ghost to come back to life, but you can't resurrect someone who was never alive to begin with. You're in love with a mirage, aren't you? So you're telling yourself that if you just hold on a little longer, the person from the beginning will finally come back for good? Let's really look at what that's costing you. Right now, you're living in a state of constant emotional hunger, aren't you? You're surviving on the memory of a person who doesn't actually exist in the present tense. It's like you're staring at a photograph of a feast while you're actually starving to death in an empty room. Alright, let's slow this down. Every time they give you a tiny glimpse of that bold version, a soft word, a moment of eye contact, or a promise that things will change, you feel that rush of hope, don't you? That's the addiction. That's the hit of dopamine that keeps you hooked on the mirage. But look. Those moments aren't signs of progress. They are just the breadcrumbs that keep you following a trail that leads absolutely nowhere. You're trading your current sanity for a hypothetical future that they have no intention of delivering. So, the plan is to just keep waiting. Are you saying your time isn't worth more than this? Well, think about the version of yourself you've become while waiting for them to wake up. You've become an investigator, a therapist, and a ghost hunter all at once. You're constantly scanning their moods, checking their tone, and looking for any shred of evidence that the real them is still in there. But the real them is the one who is hurting you right now. The real them is the one who sees you crying and decides to go to sleep. It's an expensive way to live, isn't it? You're paying with your sleep, your confidence, and your peace of mind. You've stopped investing in your own life because you're so busy trying to subsidize theirs. You're pouring all your gold into a broken machine and wondering why it won't pay out. It's a heavy realization, but you're essentially bankrolling their comfort with your own misery. So, you're telling yourself that leaving would mean giving up on them. But let's be honest, how can you give up on someone who isn't even there? You're holding on to a costume. You're fighting for a character in a play that finished its run months ago. Look. The person you are actually with is the one who treats you with indifference today. The one who makes you feel lonely even when they're sitting right next to you. That's the reality. Everything else is just a story you're telling yourself to avoid the pain of walking away. You're addicted to the what if, because the what is simply too painful to face, aren't you? So, you're telling yourself that the person who loved you like that once is still in there somewhere, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. Let's look at the science of that feeling for a second. You aren't just in love anymore, you're physiologically hooked on the intermittent reinforcement they're feeding you, aren't you? It's like a slot machine. You pull the lever 1,000 times and get nothing but coldness and silence, but then, just when you're about to walk away, they give you that one look. That one "I miss us" text. And suddenly, the bells go off and you're right back at the start, forgetting the months of starvation because of one single crumb. Alright. Let's be honest. You're addicted to the what if, aren't you? You're obsessed with the potential version of them because the actual version of them is simply too painful to accept. You keep thinking, what if they finally realize how much I love them? What if they wake up tomorrow and remember who they used to be? But look. What if is a fantasy. It's a ghost. It's a story you're writing to fill the silence they've left in your life. You're staying for a person who exists only in your imagination, and meanwhile, the person who is actually standing in the room is watching you drain yourself dry. So, the plan is to keep waiting for the miracle. Are you saying your life is just a waiting room for someone else's transformation? Well, think about that. You've put your goals, your joy, and your peace on hold, hoping they'll eventually decide to join you. But while you're waiting for them to become who they pretended to be, you are losing the person you actually are. You've become a shadow of yourself, haven't you? You're so busy trying to maintain the mirage that you've forgotten how it feels to walk on solid ground. It's a cycle that doesn't end until you decide to stop pulling the lever. You keep hoping for the jackpot, but the machine is rigged. They aren't struggling to find that old version of themselves, they've moved on from that character because they don't need it anymore. They have you exactly where they want you, hooked on the memory of a lie. It's a heavy realization, isn't it? You're fighting a war for someone who already surrendered to their own apathy. You're chasing a shadow, and you're wondering why you can't catch it. So, the plan is to just keep waiting until they finally remember how to love you. Let's really look at that. You're essentially holding your breath, hoping they'll give you permission to exhale, aren't you? But look. You're the one who is suffocating while they're breathing just fine. It's a heavy realization, but you've been treating their potential like a debt they owe you, and well, they have no intention of paying it back. You're waiting for a breakthrough, but the only thing breaking right now is your own spirit. Alright. Let's be honest. You've become an expert at making excuses for them, haven't you? When they're cold, you tell yourself they're just stressed. When they're dismissive, you say they're avoidant. When they lie, you tell yourself they're just scared of intimacy. But so you're saying that their fear is more important than your reality. You've turned into a full-time defense attorney for someone who isn't even on trial. They're just living their life exactly how they want to, while you're busy rewriting the script to make them look like the hero who just hasn't found their way yet. Well, let's slow this down for a second. What if there is no way for them to find? What if the person you're waiting for was never lost, because they never existed? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? Because if that person was a lie, then the time you spent loving them feels like a waste. But it wasn't a waste of love, it was a lesson in discernment. You fell for the Mirage because you have a beautiful heart that wants to believe in the best of people. But look. You can't keep pouring that gold into a person who is a lead weight. So, you're telling yourself that if you leave now, you'll miss the moment they finally change. That's the addiction talking, isn't it? That's the fear of missing out on a fantasy. But let's look at the evidence. How many moments have already passed where they could have chosen you? How many times have you laid your heart open, only for them to step over it? It's a hard truth, but you aren't waiting for them to change, you're waiting for them to admit they were lying. And they might never do that. They don't have to admit anything as long as you're still there, accepting the crumbs and calling it a meal. It's time to stop negotiating with a ghost, isn't it? You're trying to build a life on a foundation of what if, but you're starting to realize the ground is sinking. You don't need them to wake up for you to finally start living again. You just need to stop lying to yourself about who is actually standing in front of you. You're addicted to the version they pretended to be, but you're being destroyed by the person they actually are. So, are you finally ready to stop chasing the shadow and start looking at the light? So, the choice is finally sitting right there in front of you, isn't it? Look. You can keep chasing the person they pretended to be, or you can start protecting the person you actually are. It's a heavy realization, but you've been mourning a ghost while the real version of them has been showing you exactly who they are every single day. Alright, so are you telling yourself that you're not strong enough to walk away from the Mirage? Well, you've been strong enough to survive on crumbs for months. Imagine what you could do if you finally directed all that love back toward yourself. It's time to stop lying to yourself about the potential, and start looking at the reality. The script has ended, and the lights are up. You're addicted to a version of them that doesn't exist, aren't you? It's time to let the ghost go. If you decide to.